Hello and welcome to Cielo Costa's video series on digital transformation in the built environment. We talk to industry leaders and experts about some of the unique challenges in the sector, from legacy digital and physical infrastructure to complex regulatory requirements to the many AI, software and PropTech solutions that are on offer. If you work in the built environment and are looking for some pointers and the perspective of your peers, this might be for you. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Great. Well, Amie, thanks for joining me today for our discussion around digital transformation in the built environment, specifically talking about Undivided Ventures and the work you're doing in that space. I think before we get into the details, it should be great if you could give me a little overview of what Undivided Ventures does and your role within the business, if that's okay.
Sure. We're a venture capital fund. We are based in Hong Kong, and we invest into early stage companies that are trying to solve the sustainability challenges that we see in the built environment. And that covers all aspects of the built environment, so operating buildings, but also infrastructure as well. My role is head of impact, so I look at the solutions that we should be actually investing in to have the greatest sustainability and financial impact, and then also help to work with those companies along their journey whilst we invest in them, to help them to be able to be ready from both a kind of operational but also sustainability perspective for the future fundraisers and hopefully exits.
Cool. And in terms of the companies that you talk to and you look at from an investment perspective, where are they based? Obviously, you're in Hong Kong. And it's a mixture of Asia and Europe? Can you give me an idea of like where those companies are you're talking to?
Yeah, we're a global investor because we really believe in investing in best of class. The companies we do invest in, though, we do speak to them before we invest and make sure that they have the ability to scale to Asia and that they're appropriate for the Asian market, and we try and support them on that. That's very much part of our mandate. But yeah, we have investments in the UK, we have investments in North America, in Israel, and also in Asia here as well.
Cool. And then with the companies you talk to, in terms of who their customers are and who they're trying to sell to with their sort of technology solutions around sustainability in the built environment, are they often selling to very big corporates? Is it mainly construction? Can you give me an idea of like who are they talking to in terms of who their solutions are being built for?
Yeah, it can be actually any part of the value chain within the life cycle of a real asset. So it could be, for example, aimed at an architect or construction engineer as a target client, or it could actually be the main contractor. It could be an asset manager who has thousands of assets that they manage, and the platform might be looking at doing helping them to work out where they should be spending money to decarbonize a whole portfolio in the most efficient way. So it really does depend upon what that solution is, because there's so many players within the value chain of a real asset. It's quite a complex industry. And that's a very good question, because sometimes really intelligent people create solutions because they see there's a problem in the industry, but maybe come from more academic standing and don't necessarily always think about, well, how can they actually access the market? Because it can be quite challenging to know who you're selling to. Yeah,
like you say, it's quite a complex industry and there's different regulations and standards and industry setups across different parts of the world. So I guess going back to that global question, is the variation in the types of solutions you're seeing in different parts of the world? Does the UK differ from Hong Kong, for example, or where are the similarities, but also where are there differences from a global perspective in terms of those types of solutions?
Yeah, great question. I think that there's a lot of innovation in Europe and also North America, actually, around materials, deep tech, solutions that take a lot of time and a lot of capital investment to be able to solve. But they're the big issues that do need solving. really we do see a lot coming out of UK and Europe and North America. Decarbonisation kind of platforms and solutions that can be scaled across portfolios. You can see that all over the world. Australia, there's a lot of players in that space, Asia. So I think it's a very common problem. I would say any technical solutions around, say, biodiversity, so GIS mapping solutions using satellite technology or drone technology or even acoustic technology. There's various ways that you can help to be able to understand biodiversity challenges and solutions. Primarily we're seeing that coming from Europe. But being able to be scaled to Asia, which our portfolio company is actually Gentian, has successfully done some projects in Hong Kong, in China, in Japan, and they're from the UK. And they really scaled it out in London, where in the UK there's regulations around biodiversity net gain, and that helped to drive that company to be created. But actually, for them, there's a lot of European investors that actually invest into assets in Asia, but also some Asian asset managers and owners that are interested in making a difference in this space, and so they've been able to very easily here, and also to Canada as well.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting how regulation actually drives innovation, doesn't it, in terms of the constrictions that means actually brings out creativity. Just as a general theme, we definitely see that. And then
because it provides a roadmap. And knowing for those companies that actually there will be a demand for that solution. So chopping and changing of regulation is not helpful.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So regulation can be beneficial because of the roadmap, but if it's changing every couple of years, then actually that's problematic, isn't it, for companies, because they don't know where they stand. It's an interesting point. And then in terms of so obviously sustainability is a key critical part of your investment approach. But in terms of how you define sustainability, I mean, you've got sort of carbon net zero on one hand, but then there's human aspects. So it would be good to hear how do you define sustainability as an investment approach?
Yeah, I think it's really it's a real challenge for early stage companies because they may not have much data to back up all of the claims, but there's a few things that we can do. So we have very broad themes that cover all aspects of sustainability. You identified decarbonisation and social value. We also look at biodiversity, we look at climate resilience, so climate adaptation, and also the circular economy. Now there's common metrics that you can use for some of those investment themes. Decarbonisation, circularity, I think that's quite standard and there's a lot of best practice in how you can actually calculate that. We're working with a working group called Project Frame, which is helping to actually create guidance for how to project the carbon emissions that are avoided when you're looking at early stage investing. So there are these guidelines out there. When it comes to social value, really challenging. And I think it's okay to look at case studies, and I think it's okay to look really deeply at the actual stories of maybe technology being deployed and seeing the real impact that it's had, on a project or many projects. Because not everything can be communicated by data. In the past, we have used tools that exist like the EU taxonomy, which actually is a very objective way to determine the substantial contribution of economic sustainability. And we'll always use that as a guideline, but it won't preclude us from investing if we can really see that there is a substantial sustainability contribution through other metrics. Yeah,
got it. Yeah, it's interesting. That mixture of qualitative and quantitative is it feels right, doesn't it? Because you can't always put everything down to the numbers, and there has to be some sort of qualitative insights as well about how you define sustainability. And then I think it'd be really great now to sort of dive a bit more into some of the specific tech that we actually talked about, I think, last time we spoke, and some of the real details. I guess let's start with robotics as one angle, and it'd be great to hear a bit about where you've seen robotics in terms of maybe modular solutions or grouting robots, drones, where have you seen robotics as a tech innovation work well in sustainability?
Yeah, there's so many solutions that are being created for construction sites at the moment, which is wonderful to see, because there is a global shortage of labour, which from a kind of economic perspective is quite damaging, because where you need to have new homes built rapidly and they're heavily delayed because there isn't enough skilled labour, that has huge impacts on being able to provide those homes when needed. But from a kind of very micro perspective, construction sites are a very dangerous place. They have the highest number of fatalities of any industry in the world.
Really? Wow.
But also there's a lot of repetitive strain injuries, because having to be, say, kneeling a lot of the time, getting yourself into really uncomfortable positions for long periods of time to do this work. So the fact that robotics can come in and keep people away from those dangerous activities, but also still be part of managing the robots. So that's one side that we've seen, is replacing very dangerous tasks. Fantastic. Yeah. We've also seen it in complementary solutions, where it could be like an exoskeleton to actually help people to lift heavy things, so to support a worker as well. And then you talked about modularization, so being able to actually make robotics become very efficient. You can have one central body, but with end effectors that actually do multiple tasks, so you can have high utilization of that robot. That could maybe be attaching some cladding to the side of a building, or it could also be doing some drilling, or many other different tasks, which is much more efficient from a circular economy perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And then we're also seeing there's companies that we've seen recently in Asia that also can do grouting. Again, that's a task which is really labor intensive. You're always having to be on your knees and bending over, and can be quite wasteful. These robots can work all day, all night, really efficient from a cost perspective. And can help them keep to program as well. I mean, it's definitely in the UK, with the Labour government have targeted 1.5 million new homes to be built by 2029, and one of the many challenges around that, but one of them is the lack of skilled labour and the ability of people to do that. So tech, 4 years is not that far away, but it would be, maybe technology can help to an extent to actually drive towards that target number. If you even think about how long it takes to actually become trained in a certain task as a person, that's years to be able to do that. So if you can facilitate, we never ever want to see people's jobs being taken, because we understand that is an issue, but at the same time, there is a labour shortage. So it has to be a complementary part of being able to, build these buildings that we so need.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully it's freeing up human time for other human-led skills, rather than having to spend hours on your knees doing the grouting, for example, or the other things you mentioned. And I think you mentioned as well, like drones that could actually measure heat emissions. Is that right? Yes.
So there's we've seen a couple of solutions coming out of Europe and also in Hong Kong, actually, using drone technology to be able to look at where buildings are very leaky, and therefore you can do a kind of a flyover of whole neighbourhoods. And actually see, so for government housing in the UK, for example, you can actually, where do we need to invest our money to make our real estate the most energy efficient? Oh gosh, okay, we can see from these heat maps, these are the worst, that we'll invest there first. These ones are much better. So it really helps to guide your overall expenditure planning through science and real detection, rather than looking at drawings and what it should be doing. This is real life. This is actually monitoring what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, 'cause the RICS, there's a big push towards retrofitting now, and actually, would drones then help with that? That would help with like defining where. When you say leaking, you're talking about heat leak. Is that right? Rather than water, it's like the heat emissions. Is that right? Yeah. So I've got the terminology right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what it will identify is where you've got the envelope of the building not performing as it should do, and therefore you're using, say, a gas boiler or electricity to generate cooling or heating, and is then not being kept within the building. And it's leaking out, and therefore you need to generate more heat or more cooling, and so you're using much more power to create the ambient temperature that the user needs to feel comfortable. And that's not wasteful if you're trying to heat the whole street and not just the indoor space. And that goes the same for Asia here. So Hong Kong, where I'm located, retrofit is a huge part of what needs to happen to the existing stock. We've got aged building stock here, and to identify that is quite challenging. And so we've seen drones. There's a company that I spoke to recently, and they're able to do a very similar thing, to actually either use photographic technology or to use LiDAR technology to actually go and get the quality of that building to see what should be kept and what should be retrofitted.
Yeah, definitely. That's really interesting. I think, and then another aspect we talked about was technology in material construction. So things like alternative tiles, plasterboard. It'd be great to hear a bit more about where that's developing and what your thoughts are on that area.
Yeah, so embodied carbon is an area that a lot of people are only coming to terms with now. So what that means is it's all the carbon that actually goes into making the building products. Yeah. And as our buildings become more energy efficient, there's a higher proportion of the carbon that's actually coming from making the concrete, the blocks, the lights, everything that you can see, and also the maintenance of that. So there's a lot of innovation. Most of that carbon is actually from concrete and steel, very energy intensive manufacturing processes. That concrete also uses limestone, which means it also emits carbon dioxide just as a kind of chemical reaction. So a lot of companies in Europe in particular that are innovating zero carbon concrete products. But one of our portfolio companies actually out of Israel has developed a tile which is based, I just think the story is so cool. Basically, the founder went to India and was drinking from those chai cups that you sort of drink tea from, and then you smash on the ground. Because they're not fired, they can return to the earth. They don't need any processing. But as we all know, there's still terracotta pots or being found in London from the Roman times, because they were fired. They last for such a long time. They can't break down. So she developed a tile based on that premise of how can it be returned to the earth, and so therefore it's not fired, it doesn't have any cementitious materials, and it still has the same technical properties as other tiles and is the same price point. So super excited about people like that and innovators that have come up with these sorts of products, because that's a circular economy concept. Not great being placed at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love the way that's been taken from a sort of real life experience of teacups in India, and actually using that to develop a great sort of industry-based solution. It's quite cool, isn't it? And then everyone's talking about AI, and it's a buzzword, and there's so much going around about it. But I think we talked a bit about the work of a structural engineer, and you mentioned how AI can actually now start to carry out some of the work that a structural engineer historically would have done. Could you talk a bit more about that? Yeah,
that's and I think the easiest way to describe them, they're called Structure Pal, and they are like a chat GPT for structural engineers. So they will never fully replace a structural engineer, but they can definitely make their life a lot easier and faster. So basically they just need very simple plans of from the architect of what the building will look like, and then they can come up with the structural design in the most optimized way. for whatever location they're being. So what that does is it means that you're not over designing a building. A lot of embodied carbon is just because they're putting too much material into a building in the first place. And so if you don't have to put extra material in, that's a very quick win. It also saves a lot of money and it saves a lot of time. They're doing fantastically well. They've got lots of projects all around the world actually at the moment, and I'm really excited about the impact that they're having. Just so you know, we have spoken to them from day one about how much energy is therefore having to be used in data centers to perform the task of being able to rationalize these designs. So that's something from day one when they were thinking about, well, where are we going to be hosted, etc. They've been choosing the ones with the lowest carbon footprint in terms of data centers, because as we all know, using AI generates a huge amount of carbon. And so we need to make sure that balance is met, that they're actually saving more than they're emitting. So that's something they're looking at.
I mean, that's a great point. We could have a separate conversation completely about the energy usage of AI in data centers and where they're used and how they're used and cooling and all that stuff. It's a massive, very interesting topic area that we can't have another call about that one. But I think, and also what you said, it was interesting that I'm definitely seeing AI and GPTs specific to industries actually starting to develop. So in the legal sector, there's one called Co-Counsel, which is a big US law firm, and that's specifically trained on legal documentation. So it's rather than just being a general all-purpose chat GPT, it's a specific, more expert within the legal space. I think, and maybe that AI that supports structural engineers or AI that supports lawyers and specifically trained models that are specialists in their industries might be an interesting area of development that we're going to see. Thinking about the commercial benefits of these technologies, and do you think is it a long-term play, I guess, because is there a lot of upfront cost either for the companies you're talking to or for the customers they're selling to, and you have to invest time and money before you're going to see long-term commercial gains? Or actually do you see there's actual quick wins here, over a shorter window?
Great question. And I think there's two answers for that. One is that there are some solutions that are being created that you would have to have high upfront investment to see the gains. We won't invest in those companies because to get to market is so tough. And we want the companies to be around and to continue having impact, and the only way to do that is to actually generate value either through financial savings or through getting higher rents or yields, etc. So for us, that's an incredibly important thing to look at before we invest, is that what is the cost point to the market, and are people willing to pay that? And we'll do a lot of diligence around that. Either they need to be better than so Createra, who I was talking about before, with those amazing tiles, their tiles are the same as an average tile. That's great because they're not costing more and they're delivering more value. Structure power, reducing concrete, instant savings. So you're not having to buy so much concrete. So that's usually where you're being more efficient, you're always going to be saving money.
That makes sense. I was thinking about the modular robots. That sounds complex and big and quite expensive. I don't know if that's true. I mean, to see something like that, more of a long, you're investing in modular robots, that sounds expensive.
That is a great point. So at the moment, in terms of renting them out, from what we've seen in the market, less than a year payback for actually the cost of building them. And because the program is so important on a construction site, if you're even one day late, there's huge cost penalties that you pay as a contractor. with the fact that you are guaranteed labor to do certain tasks that are not going to be late or do something wrong because they're a robot, they're going to be there and they're going to be performing. Actually, that security of being able to keep on to program, which has knock-on impacts to other trades starting, is extremely valuable. And actually, according to the sort of diligence that we've done, a lot of these robots are not on par with of labor, but it does depend on where you're located. If you're located in London, you pay labor more than if you're in India.
I see, that makes sense.
So it does depend on your geographical location.
Cool. I think we're nearly done. I think my last question would be, looking forward to 2025 and maybe beyond, what are you most excited about in terms of where you see a great opportunity or opportunities for technology to drive sustainable innovation?
So an area that I'd love to see more happening in, and hopefully we will. So this is an area that I find challenging to find companies working in this space, is actually around the climate adaptation and resilience space. So our climate is changing. That's a fact. So we are seeing either more extreme events happening or just gradually, getting hotter or wetter or whatever. And we need to be able to have our buildings and infrastructure to cope with that, because otherwise we will have to then start building new buildings, which is very carbon intensive, as we know. And we want to do that. So I would like to start seeing more solutions which can actually be easily retrofitted, as we discussed, into existing buildings that can make them more resilient to climate change. I've seen things like putting paint on the top of buildings which can reflect the sun and create a cooling effect by actually using biomimicry of the sub-Saharan ant. So I've seen some amazing stuff like that, but how scalable it is, I'm not sure. But low-cost solutions that we can easily retrofit to make our buildings more resilient to our climate changing is something we really need, because I think otherwise we're going to see vulnerable people being impacted when they shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. That's great. Thank you, Amie. Thanks for sharing all your thoughts today. It's brilliant. Really enjoyed talking to you, and we'll catch up again soon.